Hollywood is officially on edge, and insiders are calling it a full-blown Hollywood dumpster fire. From whispered studio panic to A-listers quietly backing away, the Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds controversy has exploded into a legal war that's dividing the entire industry. According to US Weekly, this lawsuit isn't just messy, it's radioactive, and now no one wants to be caught standing too close when the fallout hits. At the center of it all is Justin Baldoni, a stack of newly released text messages and a behind-the-scenes power struggle that goes way beyond one movie. We're talking Sony, disputed final cuts, and a shocking bake-off that never should have happened. Add Colleen Hoover, subtle pressure involving Taylor Swift, and suddenly this isn't just about creative differences, it's about influence. But that's not all. Apple TV just held a massive press event, and one name was noticeably absent: Ryan Reynolds. The delayed Mayday project, a surprise snub, and whispers involving Scarlett Johansson have only poured gasoline on the fire. What really happened behind closed doors, and why are Hollywood's biggest names scrambling to stay neutral? Stay with me, because once you see how this all connects, the narrative completely changes. What's playing out right now goes far beyond celebrity gossip. According to US Weekly, the situation involving Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds has escalated into something Hollywood fears the most: an uncontrollable industry-wide headache. This is no longer just a legal dispute, it's a reputational landmine, and insiders are doing everything they can to stay clear of it. Sources across the industry describe a growing sense of frustration, not because people feel personally invested, but because so many names have been dragged into the narrative without consent. High-profile figures like Ben Affleck and Matt Damon were suddenly mentioned due to private interactions that were never meant for public consumption. These weren't endorsements or strategic moves, just polite conversations that later turned into publicly unsealed text messages. That's where the anxiety really started. Once private texts become legal evidence, Hollywood relationships instantly change. Insiders say there's now a widespread fear of being casually mentioned in filings or press coverage, only to be pulled into a controversy you never agreed to participate in. One source described the entire situation as a black hole. Once your name appears, there's no easy way out. Even individuals completely unrelated to the project are drawing firm boundaries. Jennifer Lopez, who had no affiliation with the film or the lawsuit, reportedly made it clear she wanted absolutely no involvement. That reaction reflects a broader industry mindset right now. Silence equals safety. People aren't choosing sides, they're choosing distance. A prominent PR expert, Mark Borkowski, openly labeled the situation a legal psychodrama, explaining that while the reputational damage for those indirectly involved might be small, the irritation and stress levels are extreme. No one wants to wake up to headlines questioning their loyalty or intentions. What's especially telling is that even close friends of Blake and Ryan are staying quiet. No public statements, no visible support, just careful neutrality. Hollywood thrives on relationships, but it survives on risk management, and right now, this lawsuit feels volatile. Legal insiders have also raised alarms, warning that if Blake Lively were to win, it could reshape power dynamics in filmmaking, giving actors leverage studios are deeply uncomfortable with. And that fear explains the growing distance better than anything else. While the legal drama was quietly intensifying, something else happened that sent shockwaves through Hollywood, and it didn't involve court filings or leaked text messages. It happened at a major Apple TV press event in Los Angeles. Over 300 journalists were invited to hear about upcoming projects for 2026, and one title stood out immediately: Mayday, starring Ryan Reynolds and Kenneth Branagh. The movie wasn't new. In fact, Mayday was completed back in May of 2024, yet nearly 2 years later, it still hadn't appeared on the streaming platform. That alone raised eyebrows. But what happened next raised far more questions. It was publicly announced and confirmed that Ryan Reynolds would appear on stage to discuss the film. The schedule was set, the expectation was clear. Then, nothing. Ryan Reynolds never showed up. No explanation, no acknowledgement, no replacement. Apple TV simply moved on as if the appearance had never been planned. Insiders were stunned. In an industry where appearances are tightly coordinated and reputations are carefully managed, a last-minute absence like this doesn't happen without a reason. The immediate question became, who pulled the plug? Was it Ryan Reynolds himself, choosing to stay away amid the growing lawsuit controversy? Or was it Apple TV, quietly distancing itself from the optics surrounding Blake Lively and the ongoing legal war? Some even speculated whether Kenneth Branagh, Ryan's co-star, may have declined to share a stage under the circumstances. No one is talking, but the silence is loud. Shortly after the event, it was revealed that May Day had been pushed again, now scheduled for September. Apple offered no explanation for the delay, no production issues were cited, no marketing shift was announced. That vacuum of information only fueled speculation that the controversy may be influencing studio decisions behind the scenes. Hollywood insiders say this is how distancing happens, not through statements, but through quiet scheduling changes, delayed releases, and unexplained absences. It's subtle, but intentional. Studios don't want their projects overshadowed by legal drama, especially one being labeled an industry-wide headache. Whether intentional or coincidental, Ryan Reynolds' absence became another data point in a growing pattern, the industry stepping back, recalibrating, and minimizing exposure without ever saying it out loud. As if the situation weren't already spiraling, the controversy took another turn when Scarlett Johansson was suddenly pulled into the conversation despite having no direct involvement in the lawsuit. Her name resurfaced because of an audio recording that many independent creators had discussed months earlier, long before mainstream media decided to pay attention. Now that same recording is being framed as new evidence, and it's backfiring in unexpected ways. The audio centers around a phone call involving Claire Aub, a first-time director, and Steve Sarowitz, the billionaire founder behind Wayfarer Studios. Claire had previously worked with the studio, which supported and funded her film. Months after production wrapped, she released a sworn statement claiming she was verbally abused by Justin Baldoni and that he was barred from her sets and from marketing her movie. But according to depositions and testimonies that followed, no one at Wayfarer had been informed of these allegations at the time. In the recording itself, something strange happens. Instead of sounding threatening or hostile, Steve Sarowitz comes across as calm and measured. He repeatedly avoids attacking Blake Lively, avoids inflammatory language, and focuses instead on how Justin Baldoni was emotionally affected by the situation. The so-called threat referenced later turns out to be a standard legal response, saying attorneys would be contacted if further action was taken. This is where Scarlett Johansson comes in. During the call, Sarowitz mentions that Wayfarer had recently worked with Scarlett on a separate project, praising her professionalism and composure as a first-time director. That brief comparison was enough for media outlets to drag her name into the narrative, despite the fact that she had nothing to do with the lawsuit or the recording. Ironically, the recording ended up reinforcing the opposite of what it was intended to prove. Listeners noted how restrained Sarowitz was, even going as far as saying most people in the industry are respectful, adding that some individuals simply forgot how to be nice. That line, now widely quoted, has become a reputational problem for Blake Lively, not a defense. For many observers, this was another moment where evidence meant to support the claims actually weakened them. Instead of showing intimidation or misconduct, the audio highlighted professionalism on one side and raised questions on the other. And once again, what was supposed to help ended up complicating the story even further. The deeper this controversy goes, the clearer it becomes that the real battleground wasn't just the courtroom, it was Sony, and more specifically, the fight over the final cut of the film. Newly unsealed text messages between Blake Lively and Sony executive Josh Greenstein have become some of the most damaging pieces of evidence so far, not because they prove misconduct, but because they expose how much influence and pressure were being applied behind the scenes. At the center of the dispute was a so-called bake-off between Blake Lively's cut of the film and Justin Baldoni's version. Supporters later tried to frame this as a normal creative process, but industry insiders quickly pushed back. Actors don't typically get competing edits of a movie, especially when they were hired solely to perform. This situation existed only because Blake reportedly made it clear she would withhold promotion unless her version was considered. The text exchanges paint a very clear picture. Sony wasn't asking which cut was better, they were asking how close Blake's version needed to score in audience testing to justify choosing it anyway. According to the messages, Justin Baldoni's cut consistently tested higher across nearly every metric: overall enjoyment, emotional clarity, romance, and pacing. Blake's cut lagged behind, sometimes by significant margins. Despite this, the text revealed that Blake remained confident and insistent. She emphasized backing from Colleen Hoover, referenced opinions from Taylor Swift, and repeatedly reinforced her belief that her version was more elevated and evergreen, even if it didn't resonate as strongly with test audiences. In other words, the audience response became secondary to personal conviction and influence. What made this especially troubling for industry observers was how openly the power dynamics were discussed. The messages suggest that Sony was willing to accept lower testing scores to avoid conflict and maintain relationships. In deposition testimony, Josh Greenstein later admitted that Colleen Hoover's opinion had a big sway in the decision-making process, nearly equal to audience metrics. For many insiders, this was the turning point. These texts undermined claims of a power imbalance by showing that Blake Lively had direct access, leverage, and support at the highest levels. Instead of being sidelined, she appeared deeply involved in shaping the outcome, far beyond what's typical for an actor. And once these messages became public, the narrative shifted dramatically. As more details emerged from the Sony text messages and sworn depositions, the argument that Blake Lively's version of the film outperformed Justin Baldoni's cut began to fall apart. The numbers didn't support that narrative, and the documents made that painfully clear. What they revealed instead was a sustained effort to override audience metrics through pressure, persistence, and high-profile influence. According to the testing data shared internally, Justin Baldoni's cut consistently scored higher across almost every major category. His version received stronger marks for overall quality, romance, emotional clarity, and audience engagement. Blake's cut, by contrast, showed declines in key areas. The relationship dynamics between the main characters tested lower, the pacing was criticized as rushed, and confusion among viewers actually increased. Rather than accepting those results, the text exchanges show Blake pushing forward anyway. She framed the lower scores as temporary and insisted the numbers could be improved with further edits. She emphasized that Colleen Hoover preferred her version regardless of the data and made it clear she intended to keep moving ahead with her cut, not revisit the decision. What raised eyebrows inside the industry was how openly outside influence was being invoked. Blake referenced Taylor Swift's approval, mentioned Bradley Cooper as a potential resource, and worked to secure editors connected to Ryan Reynolds' circle, including individuals tied to Deadpool. This wasn't a creative debate anymore, it was a coordinated effort to stack support. Even more concerning were the admissions that followed. In deposition testimony, Sony executives acknowledged choosing Blake's cut despite its lower test scores, largely to keep key stakeholders satisfied. One executive admitted that Colleen Hoover's opinion carried nearly the same weight as hard data from audience testing. For studio professionals, that revelation was alarming. This wasn't about improving the film, it was about control. The documents suggest Blake wasn't willing to walk away unless her version was released, regardless of how audiences responded. That stance contradicted later claims that decisions were made purely on artistic merit or fairness. For critics, this segment of evidence did more damage than any headline. It showed how leverage, celebrity influence, and personal relationships were used to reshape a production decision, something Hollywood typically tries to avoid acknowledging. And once these facts became public, it became harder to argue that Blake lacked power in the process. By the time all the evidence, text messages, and deposition testimony were unsealed, the damage wasn't limited to one lawsuit. It had become a full-scale trust collapse within Hollywood. Industry insiders now say the most lasting consequence for Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds may not be legal at all, but reputational. Multiple legal experts have pointed out that the newly released material actively undermines claims of a power imbalance. The texts show direct access to studio executives, influence over creative decisions, and the ability to mobilize high-profile allies. In legal terms, that's not marginalization, that's leverage. And for many watching from the outside, the contradiction has been impossible to ignore. From a PR perspective, the situation has become a case study in what not to do. PR professionals argue that once private communications are weaponized in court, relationships across the industry suffer. Actors, directors, and executives begin to fear casual conversations, knowing they could one day appear as public exhibits. That fear alone has caused Hollywood to pull back. Sources close to the situation say Blake has largely laid low, spending time with family and avoiding public appearances. While Ryan Reynolds has reportedly been supportive behind the scenes, the silence itself speaks volumes. There have been no aggressive public defenses, no coordinated media push, just restraint. In Hollywood, that usually signals damage control. What's especially telling is how many former allies have gone quiet. People who once appeared connected are now emphasizing distance, neutrality, or outright lack of friendship. As one PR consultant explained, rebuilding trust after something like this takes time and often requires reminding the industry why they were embraced in the first place. Legal analysts also warn that the broader implications still loom. If this lawsuit were to set precedent, it could fundamentally alter how creative authority is assigned in filmmaking. That's why studios are watching closely and why so many professionals are quietly hoping the case ends without a dramatic ruling. At the center of it all is a simple reality. Hollywood runs on trust, discretion, and unspoken boundaries. Once those are broken, the consequences ripple outward. And for Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, the hardest part may not be winning or losing in court, but repairing relationships in an industry that never forgets. So where does all of this leave Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and a Hollywood industry that clearly wants this chapter closed? What started as a dispute over a final cut has spiraled into a legal war, a PR nightmare, and an industry-wide headache that's still unfolding in real time. The unsealed text messages, the disputed audience testing, and the growing silence from former allies have changed the narrative in ways no press statement ever could. For Hollywood, this case isn't just about who wins or loses, it's about power, precedent, and trust. Studios, directors, and actors are watching closely, knowing that the outcome could reshape how creative control works going forward. And for Blake Lively, the concern now isn't just the lawsuit itself, but how the industry perceives her once the dust settles. One thing is clear, Hollywood has a long memory. Relationships matter, discretion matters, and when private conversations become public evidence, the fallout lasts far longer than a single headline cycle. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think this controversy permanently changes Blake Lively's standing in Hollywood, or will time and silence smooth things over? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like if this breakdown helped connect the dots, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories Hollywood doesn't want to talk about.